Hello there, fellow humans, and welcome to another disappointing shop video. And this time we have, well, two vehicles at tier 7 here, and that is the Panther M10 and the AMX 1357. Both of these are very much disappointing. And it says most profitable here, but then again, marketing is the most profitable thing because you won't profit at all by buying this vehicle. But what you can profit from is liking and subscribing, because that way you won't miss any of the other disappointing reviews on this channel. So, anyway, tier 7 is not great for making crits, obviously, because you get less damage than a tier 8, so you get less crits as well. So, that is not an option here. So, if you want to have a tank for making crits, then these two are already out. As well as these two are very hard to play because they're, bad. So, if you're a new player or a inexperienced player, then these are also a relatively bad option. So that leaves the expert player that wants to have a challenge but doesn't want any credits, that somehow thinks fighting against a smasher is fun. So that's about the target audience for this bundle here, I would assume, because that's about what you end up with. Because now, obviously, they can both be relatively fun if you do play them correctly, especially the AMX, but this one, 2500 DPM, that is relatively solid. Obviously, only 160 alpha damage, but that is relatively common for tier 7s of this type. 8 degrees of gun depression and relatively decent mobility. That is somewhat fine. However, the armor of this tank is essentially, to most vehicles, non-existent. The turret can be useful to some degree. However, overall, there is not much to do. With the AMX, you have a relatively decent autoloader, and I'm actually going to start with this one in terms of the battle. So, 2200 DPM, so less than the Panther. Obviously, no armor whatsoever, and it is also more mobile, and you only have 7 degrees of gun depression, which still is decent, but it is not great. The problem with this tank is you have a 90 alpha damage, which is absolutely abysmal, and that is just completely holding this vehicle back a lot, because to peak for 6 shots, that's not great, because you have to stay peaked for 5 seconds, whereas other vehicles, you can do more damage in a shorter time frame, which makes them more usable in that regard. However, let's play them, let's see how it goes. So here we go with the AMX 1357, and one bad thing, essentially, is that it's a tier 8 battle, because this thing in a tier 8 battle is essentially, like, yeah, your 1166 hit points for the enemy team, and that's about all you're useful for. So that is relatively unfortunate, especially against something like a Scorpion G, where, yeah, now, with a light tank, you want to have as much alpha damage as possible, because that means you have to peak as little as possible. With this thing, you have to either stay peaked for 5 seconds and pray that your 6 shots actually hit, or you have to play in a very, very, well, complicated way to be able to avoid the enemy while still being able to do damage. So you're essentially handicapping yourself by you're paying to handicap yourself with this vehicle, whereas instead you can get the M41D, which is a more traditional light tank. You get it for free, and it's going to work just as well, if not better. So yeah, there's a problem with that. Look at that damage. You basically have to... How did that hit? Anyway, can't peek him again, because he's obviously got 400 alpha damage, and I don't. Because he can unload instantly, and that is obviously very problematic. So if you get in any fight with any other vehicle that has any alpha damage, and they trade you, they peek you fast, boom, you lost that fight. You always have to catch out the enemy in an advantageous position for you. Now, obviously, that you should do that in any tank, but especially with this one, where simply by playing the vehicle, you already have a disadvantage, which is not great, and paying for a disadvantage is obviously not very cool. So, you can obviously have fun in this tank, you know, with a lot of shots it does do. It can be very fun. But overall, as you can see, I have to stay peaked for quite a long time. So, and that is obviously not very useful, and even in that long time, I don't really cause that much damage, so that's definitely not very helpful. Alright, Gravedigger's over there. It's not great, so we're gonna have to try to pre-aim here. Get some shots into this guy. That is about where this tank is effective, when you have the enemy not paying attention. But even then, finishing them off is gonna be a challenge. Alright, now, T69 is probably gonna go down before I can get some shots. Never mind, I can actually get some shots. I'd like to actually pen him. There we go. That is nice. Now we have the Emil and the Gravedigger remaining. Gravedigger has the equally garbage gun to this vehicle. However, it actually does have some armor. And a lot of it, actually. So While the Gravedigger is also not great. It has some qualities that redeem itself for the horrible gun, but this one really doesn't, so I wouldn't recommend buying this vehicle. I mean, if it were a Tech Tree tank, playing through it, that would be perfectly fine. However, paying money for essentially a disadvantage isn't really a great thing in my opinion, so if you're a tank enthusiast that likes a challenge and is very good at the game, then this can be a good choice. However, everyone else that is interested in making creds or even playing well should stay away from this vehicle. So, and here we go with the Panther M10, which is about as useful as an umbrella in the Sahara Desert and as interesting as a wet shoe. So, unless you're interested in wet shoes, then it's very interesting. But that's about what this tank is, right? If you're interested in it, it can work, but otherwise, why would you get it? You can get the M41D for free right now in the game for the missions, essentially. So, why would you spend money on this thing, which essentially does have light tank armor, but doesn't have light tank mobility? So, that's a bit disappointing. But, I mean, overall, you can just get the Panther 1 and you have a very similar experience, and you don't have to pay for it. You just have to pay for it with your time, which is money. So, anyway. Anyway, how about some Challenger? That's a bit too much challenging here. Be it mentally or in the game. Because normally you don't do that. Anyway, there's a... He's dead. The Dracula is doing Draculaing as well. I mean, at least he survived longer than 12 seconds, so that is already a world record for a new Dracula player, so... Congratulations, well done. Anyway. I think you can smell the sarcasm today, isn't it? But anyway. Let's go for the Britannia Panther, ideally. Now, it's a tier 6, but still. It has the same gun with a couple downgrades, so... Oof. Let's have a go at it. It's going pretty well so far, I guess. I mean, 800 damage is pretty disappointing, but anyway. Here we go. Go with this guy, and, yeah. Throw my toothpicks at him to get rid of him. There we go. Wonderful. That is very nice. Now, obviously, if this were a Tech Tree vehicle, I'd review it a bit differently, but given that it's a premium and they have to actually pay for it, why would you do that? That's like, no. I mean, I don't know, you can invest that money into a lot more useful things. Like a channel membership, for example, if you want to do that, which is marginally less useless, but anyway. Here we go. Kuro. Gonna get some free damage here, ideally. Maybe get to 2k, 2.5k. That'd be somewhat acceptable, I'd say, for a tank like this. And there is a... Yep, there we go. Dreadnought. Now it's only an Annihilator left alive, which... Well, if you don't have a team, you ain't gonna win, even an Annihilator. So there's that. He's not looking at me, which is good. So try and get a track shot. I think he just gave up. And never mind. That's 2-6, which is not too bad, but anyway... Overall, the vehicle is uninteresting, so I wouldn't recommend it. Obviously, if you're a collector and something like that, then you can get it at that point. However, for any like serious credit earning or fun having opportunities, I definitely wouldn't recommend it. And the same goes for the AMX 1357, even though that's a bit more fun. But overall, I wouldn't recommend either of them, and I would just either get the M41D, like it's right here, for free. It's not that hard to get it, but obviously 5 days left, so if you haven't gotten it already, better get it. I think it took me about 8 hours to get it, so that's relatively fine if you're a player of decent skill. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one. Goodbye.